Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Dianne A, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action. How to tell if you're gifted, even if no one told you. Hi, friends, it's Dianne here at Someone Gets Me. And today we're talking about how you, an adult who might feel different or weird or ahead of your time, is actually gifted, and what that even means in our life as an adult. I'm drinking my tea right now, enjoying my afternoon, thinking about these things because most of the people who I've worked with over the decades didn't know they were gifted or never really used that word, but yet they fit all the criteria. And once they have language, they're able to embrace those parts of them that they've previously been judging. So most gifted people, most gifted adults don't realize they're gifted. And even if they went to gifted classes when they were younger, they don't think it still applies as an adult. Because for many people, that word gifted seems to imply a special class while you're in elementary school or junior high school, or maybe even high school, or it means a special program. And then somehow magically it ends when school, when primary school ends. But that's not how it works. Once you know that your nervous system is different and your brain cognition is different than the average, then that means you're gifted. It's a processing issue and it doesn't go away. Now, when you get out into the work world or even into advanced studies, you notice that your competence level gets reinforced more and more and more. And so that part of you that's gifted, if you will, shines in different ways. But still, the quality of the way you process remains the same. Now, it's really interesting that as people get older and get closer to working less or less pressure, then they notice that the experience of being gifted and intense seems to amplify. Well, in my experience, what I notice is that it amplifies because the person isn't so busy trying to do these other things. But it's always been there. So if you're one of those people who does things a little differently or maybe a little bit off step, or people look at you and go, how do you know these things in advance? You probably are gifted. Now, the word is not a bad word. It doesn't mean you're special. In fact, it might mean that your life has been more difficult than others. And it's not just about IQ. It's about processing. It's about how you see the world. And so there's some signs that tell me when someone's gifted. And the first thing that I always notice is that you are able to use 3-syllable words comfortably in sentences. It's part of your language structure. And if I was to transcribe your language as you're speaking to me, there would be complex structure. There would be semicolons and colons, and you would have a more comprehensive way and sometimes more precise way of expressing yourself. Sometimes you would search for the correct word before you would say it because it needs to be correct, not in an ego way, but in an exacting kind of way. You're also somebody who probably has a lot of intensity. You feel deeply about things, or an intensity can show up in your mind where you ask lots of questions and go down rabbit holes. And maybe you've even gotten in trouble at work for asking clarifying questions too many times, or wanting to go down these exquisite paths to learn things. That's an intellectual overexcitability. That's an intensity that shows up in people. You might have been one of those people who gets in trouble for your high activity, and people might say, oh, that person's jiggles too much, or they do all these things and they're too physically active, and their leg is shaking or whatever. But it's that psychomotor intensity that is where you'll find all your really great athletes. and people who are really good with their body, dancers, things like that. So there's ways to tell. There's signs that someone like me who works only with gifted neurodivergent people can see right away. Whether you call it that or not is kind of irrelevant. Most of the people who start working with me individually or even come to my events don't really use that word. However, it is the appropriate word as well. You don't have to use a word, but to understand that there is something processing wise, brain wise different. Your brain has an asynchronous development where your brain develops differently than what you see in a textbook all the time. So you're going to have to see that, oh, I didn't do it quite that way. I did it this way. Gifted people also have an emotional depth and a sense of justice that is remarkable. That most of the people I work with, their sense of justice is so strong that it overpowers other parts of their life. Sense of justice at work, with people being treated in an equitable and respectful and honorable manner, and justice in our society, and personal morals and ethics that they hold on to regardless of what other people say or do. Gifted people tend to have that richness and depth. I was walking with a friend of mine, and we're both neurodivergent and gifted, and there was this squirrel and her little babies, and they were just kind of cruising along on the edge of the woods when we were walking by this lake, and they were so cute, and they kind of watched us, probably because they're used to the people going by, and we kind of looked at them, and then we walked on a little bit further, and all of a sudden she looked at me and said, "I wonder where they live. Or do you think that's their only brothers and sisters, or how do they do that?" And you could tell that in her mind, when she saw the mother squirrel and the babies, she was thinking about all the collateral information, where they live, how many babies there are, what kind of squirrel it is, how old the mother is, what's going to happen next, what do they eat, and all of these advanced questions. Now, most people see the squirrels and go, "Oh, they're cute." And that's as far as it goes. Or, "Oh, look, there's 3. And that's as far as it goes. Or maybe, "Where's the dad?" That's as far as it goes. But we discussed that both the parents make the nests and where the nests would be and how come they're out where there's the people. That in-depth conversation and the curiosity that goes beyond the observable information is a sign that you're gifted. Not everyone does that. Gifted people also tend to narrate their life internally. There's always a dialogue, a story, a conversation, putting together data points, having idea synthesis and bringing things together. And it's natural, and it's happening most of the time, if not all the time. I noticed that with myself, that I'm always kind of dialoguing. This is what I'm going to do next. This is what's going to happen, and on and on and on. It's part of how the brain processes things. And so you could be gifted and maybe be seen as too much or too intense, or think too fast, or speak too loudly, or all of these things, the too much part. And really what's happening here is that you process the world differently. You experience the world differently than a lot of people around you. So they label it that because they can't get there from here. Their experience won't be like that. So it's like you're watching a 3D movie with Dolby surround sound, and they're watching a black and white TV. You can be watching the same show and have a totally different experience, which is also why you, as a gifted adult, are probably seen as the competent one in your office. Or you might have even tried working in many different company settings and now have said, "I'm done with that. I'm going to go be an entrepreneur. I'm going to run my own business. I'm going to do my own thing." Because I go to a lot of entrepreneur events, and they always talk about the entrepreneur mind. Well, it's the same thing as a gifted mind. They describe exactly the same thing, because often gifted people don't fit into the closed box paradigm that we're required to fit in many company settings. Now, gratefully, more and more in the society, people and big companies are embracing neurodivergence and giftedness in different ways. And still, there is that viewpoint of it's a disability, or what's wrong with you, or how come you have to be like that. Well, the truth is, people who are neurodivergent and gifted are born like this. That's the truth. And the truth is, people who aren't are also born like that. And there's no wrong answer. There's no bad person or wrong way to do it. In fact, the best teams have a mixture of different kinds of neurodivergence and gifted people with different skills and talents, and different neurotypical people, and all different kinds of ways of experiencing and solving issues and discussing things. That's the best team, because everybody has a different way of doing things and looking at things. And it's in that diversity, it is in that collective, that there's a synergistic effect that explodes the team into greater success than they could ever have. So to know that you're gifted, even if no one's ever used that word or you haven't, really helps you understand that maybe some things you've been judging yourself for, or you've allowed yourself to be shamed about, or you've hidden, can begin to surface. That's what I do with all my people. So if you're wondering about these kinds of things, schedule a get to know you call, check out the links, and the link is in the show notes, and go ahead, schedule a call with me. It doesn't cost you anything but your time. And I'm happy to help point you in the direction and show you that who you are is perfect, whole, and complete exactly as you are, even if you don't understand it all the way. That's why there's people like me in the world who can help you put language to it and understanding, so you can have awareness and make friends with yourself. Now, a lot of times gifted people mask who they really are. In other words, they dim their light, or they hide their intensity, or they use humor to cover it up. And that is really a misplacement of your great energy. Now, that doesn't mean you rub it in everyone's face, but that you can do things faster or differently. It means to be aware that when you're hiding behind a mask, that the experience other people have of you is diminished. And there's much more to you, and there's much more to your experience than you're allowing to show up. There's also times where you might be misaligned or out of place, or feel like kind of difficult, or people might look at you and say, oh, you're intimidating. I've had people do that to me, where, oh, you're so smart, I'm intimidated by you. Well, when I was in my 20s, I took that personally, like there was something wrong with me. And I learned better over the years that if somebody's intimidated by my intelligence, that that's something they can work on. But that doesn't mean I have to rub it in their face, right? Just because I have a higher intelligence or a different processing speed doesn't mean that they're wrong or bad. Now, if that other person has learned that, then that's something that they get to work on. That's what relationships are about anyway, is all of us working on our own things, our own sensitivities, our own way of doing things. The other big part that shows up of how people can know they're gifted, even if you don't call it that, is by you becoming the competent one wherever you are, where you rise to the top because of the difference that you make. So I've gone into many situations over my career where I'm like, I'm just going to be an audience member. I'm just going to be part of the group, and I'm not going to lead intentionally. And then pretty soon, somebody's picking me out as a leader of of a subgroup or of the group, or asking me for things, even if it's not the official leader thing, because people can see it in us. So if you're one of those people who is looked at by your peers as competent and knows what you're doing, then often you are gifted. And sometimes you might want to hide that difference, and sometimes it kind of shows up anyway. So being a gifted adult is something that's magical and beautiful, and it can also be very difficult and very challenging. But I think the challenges arise most when we are in denial, or we try to pretend like our differences are not there or not real. And they are real. And sometimes it makes life a lot harder. I've had people say, oh, well, you think you have it easy. And the truth is, no, I've not had it easy at all. And most of the people I work with have not had it easy. In fact, for some of us, life has been very challenging because of the depth of the way we feel and experience and think. In fact, I remember once, I think I was in fifth or sixth grade, and we were at the state fair in Sarasota County, Florida. And I was with my father. And I remember saying, and watching all the people, I think we were going up in the Ferris wheel, or we were up high. We were on one of the rides that was a little high. And I remember, I think it was a swing thing, actually. Then I remember looking at my dad and saying, I just wish I could be average for a few minutes. I didn't know what that meant at the time. I didn't understand the profound nature of that comment. And he said, well, we're not average. I didn't know what that all meant then, but now I understand it, that there was a part of me that was yearning just to be fitting in, where I didn't have to stand out and didn't have to be the smart one, or didn't have to be the one who knew things. But the truth is, when we're born like this, we're born like this. And so it's a good time, as an adult especially, to make friends with those parts of you. Now, many, many years later, I've made friends with the parts of me that are gifted or maybe a little quirky or funny. I have a client who says, just give me the freak flag stuff. Show me the quirky stuff. And I had somebody else who I work with, who on the second meeting looked at me and said, how long have you been like this? And in every situation, what they were really trying to say was, thank you for bringing your gift to me, even though I don't know and understand how it works. So if you don't understand how your inner workings work, you probably want to work with somebody to learn about that. That's what I do with people all day long. And if you do understand how it works, let that inner part of you show up, because you're beautiful. You're amazing. So you can tell if you're gifted and nobody's ever used the word, or you didn't know it, if you secretly believe that there's something different about you and other people just don't quite get it. You move a little faster, you think a little faster, or you process at a different rate from the others. Those are some real telltale signs. So if any of this resonated with you, feel free to do a call with me or read any of my books, any of those things, and start to learn about yourself and make friends with yourself. No matter how much we know, no matter how aware we are, there is always something to learn and grow into, and another piece of us allowing to emerge. So I hope this episode has served you and helped you and reminded you that who you are is perfect, whole, and complete. And so until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, because you're a rock star. You're here on purpose with a mighty purpose. So go out there and let your light shine. And remember that being gifted is a gift. It also requires more discernment and awareness. So allow yourself to grow into deep appreciation for who you are. Until the next time, be well.
Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episode's, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.